follow. And I'm going to just put up here, if you're taking notes, neuroplasticity, Neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity was actually talked about in the 1800s. But what happened is that people thought the human brain was actually like a hard drive. It was created and was never able to change. And I see that in my own life, and we certainly see it here. People are coming back over and over again because they have a need to improve their time management, to improve their life, and to do things that matter. And they think if they come to just one webinar or use a tool once, that it's going to change their brain. The hard part about this is that we've used our brains over and over and over again to the point that we've fallen into ruts. And John, I'm going to let you ask these questions in chat because it's hard for me to see it because I'm a lot older than you. So I wish that my neuroplasticity could fix my eyesight. But all that this means is that the brain, which is neuro, is plastic, P-L-A-S-T-I-C. The brain is plastic. The good news is that we can change it. We can change from being in ruts to choosing to learn new things. And the reason that this is so important is that we can begin to choose to live our life in familiar ways over and over and over again when they're already unhappy. John talks about this, that we use faulty assumptions, that we assume that our lives have been disorganized and hard and difficult, and that they're going to stay that way. We believe that when you bring in priorities and purpose to this time management, you can actually change your perspective. And as you begin to change that, you realize that the brain is not hardwired. It's actually available to change. And that is good news for me. I'm 56 years old. Our target market, as we do a survey, has been that 40 to 65-year-olds are the bulk of people here. Why? Because they want to change. They want to believe that their life can be different tomorrow than it is today. So as we go into this, I am going to show some slides, but we're going to be opening it up to the science of all this and how it can function in your own life. So John, I'm going to share my screen. I want to make sure that you can see it. So let me go on into this, and I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go into two concepts of the brain science of how all this works. And when you begin to see it, you'll understand the power of how things change over time. I want to start this conversation between the I and the soul. The brain is multifaceted, but we have all of these parts of the brain. When we look at our brain, we see it's pretty amazing what we see in these things. The human brain is made up of multiple parts. And when you look at it, you'll understand that there is a prefrontal cortex, which creates all of the thoughts, all of the ideas, all of the plans. That's in the very front part of your head. If you were just to look right above your eyebrows, it's the newest part of the brain. And it thinks in very logical, linear ways. What separates us from the ancestors that we had in the past. And the beautiful part about the prefrontal cortex, the one thing that it does better than anything else is that prefrontal cortex allows us to imagine and to dream. And that's where our brain changes. In the middle of the brain is called the midbrain. And that's where we feel feelings and emotions. Often it's not even awareness. It's that subconscious feeling of, I want more out of life. I want to experience it. I want to breathe it in. And then at the very end of our brain is what is called the reptilian brain. It's things that happen where your heart rate goes up when you're frightened, or when you're relaxed, your heart rate goes down. But I want to start today's conversation about why neuroplasticity is so important, is that I believe there are two parts of how we function. There is the I in the brain, and there is the me in the brain. And so I'd like to read just a short couple of paragraphs from my book, The 7-Minute Solution. This is at the very end of the book, and it talks about the I and the soul. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen so you can actually see this. As I stand up, this is on page 236. They're just 2 paragraphs. I was wanting to learn about neuroplasticity and why we get stuck in ruts. And I talked to one of my friends that's a psychologist. His name is Dan Holmes. And he said he was the person that introduced the idea of creating cow paths. Now we're going to come back to how we live in these ruts or cow paths in just a minute. But he wanted to help me understand the concept of neuroplasticity, to help me understand the psychological difference between the mind and the soul, which both of those things take place in our brain. Dan said, and this is really important, I see the mind as the storehouse of memory and thoughts. I see the soul as pure consciousness. In counseling sessions, I often hear people speak of events in their life in a personal form of plurality. I thought, what in the world is plurality? Why is he seeing plurality? And this is what he says. They will say something in these counseling sessions that I felt sad when I let myself speak so harshly. I felt sad when I let myself speak so harshly. How many times have we done that? I wish I hadn't said that to someone. I wish I had studied more. I wish I had gotten that project done in a more timely way. So there's plurality. I felt sad when I let myself speak so harshly. Notice the 2 people in this statement, the I and the myself. Who are the 2 people in this narrative, and how are they different? This is the last paragraph. I had to ask Dan to pause so I could process what he might be saying between the I and the me. So he continued, when I'm counseling this person, I believe that the I they are speaking about is their soul. The I is their pure connection with who they want to be. You know, as we go back to neuroplasticity, we think that our brain is hardwired. We think we can't change into a person that's different, a person we want to be. The I lives in the present moment. It's fully awake and fully aware. The I feels meaning and depth and richness in life. That's why John and I have been teaching these classes on purpose, on priorities, on trying to reconnect. Let me say that again. Their I feels meaning and depth and richness in life. On the other hand, the myself in this internal dialogue comes from the mind. The myself is the mind that labels everything. Every action in our life is either good or bad. Many thoughts are tied to past memories, which makes sense. And if those memories that we've had in life are negative, your mind may lead you to a path of depression. If your mind puts too much energy in focusing into the future, your mind may lead to a life of anxiety. So he goes back and he says there are 2 parts of our brain, and let me go back and share my screen. These 2 parts that we see in our mind are the I and the me. The I that he talks about is the soul. The me, which you can see in capital letters, is the mind. As we go on and move through this, I want you to look at how this affects your life. The fact that we have an I and a me. And as we go through this, I want to say that the left brain and the left brain and the right brain, we've always heard that they're very different. And I do believe they're different, but in science, they are now saying that they both communicate with each other. But if you were able to take a brain, this is the in-between of the brain, and lay it out, you literally would have 2 sides of the brain. It would actually split. The left and the right brain are not connected. But in my mind, when I teach these classes, the left brain is that me. It's the mind. And listen and see if this is kind of how you feel about what's happening in that left brain. The left brain is logical, linear. It's sequential. It's the organized side of the brain. But The left brain is very critical. It's judgmental of ourselves. It says, why haven't you planned this? Why haven't you budgeted it? But the one word I want you to see in all this is that the left brain labels everything that we do. It's either plus or minus. It's either good or bad. It's either right or wrong. The left brain functions like a computer, plus, minus, yes, no, good, bad. The left brain is methodical, structured. It loves details. It's factual. It likes routines. And again, if you're taking notes, it prefers the familiar. How many times have you walked into the office knowing you needed to do a project, and the last time you did the project, it did not work? But because it's familiar, you've chosen to do the project the same way. The left brain creates order. And the last thing is that 96% of people have their language center in the left brain, and therefore the left brain is continually talking. In fact, it never ends. They say that the subconscious mind has 40 to 60,000 thoughts per day. And how many of those are constantly talking to you with those labels and those judgments saying, I'm not good enough. I wish I had let myself do that differently. And so we looked at and we compare it to the right brain. Let me get rid of those images. And when you compare it to the right brain that we've had in this discussion is the I, or the soul. The left brain is often seen as the me or the mind. It's very specific. But look at the I, or the soul, and ask yourself, when we're talking about time management, how much of your time, how much of your year, how much of your day are you spending focusing on things that are artistic, that you can see in pictures? The right brain processes things very quickly. The left brain has to see it and work through it. The right brain just has to see it. The right brain is flowing, emotional, it's vibrant, intuitive, it lives in the moment. The people that we coach, they want to live in the moment, but we're doing all that planning. The right brain can see the big picture. It experiences the senses. It is adventuresome, imaginative, creative, full of ideas. It has very fewer boundaries. It accepts. It has ideals. It begs for connections. But the biggest thing about the right brain is that it's quiet. It accepts us and thinks about ourselves in ways that only the right brain can. So John, I'm going to make sure that you're still there. He may have had to step away. John, are you there? Can you make some comments about why it's so hard that we all in business it is important to have that left brain, those skill sets, but why are people looking for the right brain? And if you'll comment on that and also look at people's comments, I'd love to have you comment in the chat. This is important. We have to have these skill sets, but I think people are coming to the 7-minute life because they want to experience life. So John, if you could read some of those comments and reply to some of those.
Yeah, we don't have any questions quite yet. Some are saying they live definitely in their left brain and want to live in the right brain. There's two things that I want to lift up out of this, and this came out, I think it was 2 or 3 webinars back when we were talking about project management, and I think this puts a face to what I was trying to explain. And Allyson, is there a way am I toggling to the middle of the screen, or am I a little side guide?
No, John, when you talk, you should be in the middle of the screen.
Are you guys seeing my board okay? When we talked about project management, one of the things I lifted up is the very first thing you want to do is look at the outcomes that you want to create. And I was sharing with people that there are 2 outcomes in particular that you want to identify. And most goal setting work, most time management work, it only looks at half of the picture, and I believe it's related to exactly what Allyson was saying between the left and the right brain. The first one that I mentioned were I call them hard outcomes, And Angela, who I don't know if you're in the call, Angela. If you are here, give a shout out in there. She's been in several calls. And oh, good. Okay. Angela made the comment as I was trying to define the difference between hard and soft outcomes, that the hard outcomes were those that were quantifiable. And I'll give you a couple examples here in a second. The hard outcomes were the ones that were quantifiable, and or quantitative. Let me use the word quantitative. That way my OCD for parallelism will be satisfied. Quantitative. Now I gotta spell it. Here we go. And the soft outcomes are qualitative. So let me give you some sense of what that means. Let's say, for example, it's the new year. A lot of people have made goals of getting in better shape, and they're working on their fitness and their health. The quantitative outcome they may be looking for is to lose 18 pounds. It may be to lower their heart rate. They may have a blood pressure problem and they're trying to regulate their blood pressure. Those are very measurable outcomes that are quantifiable. And our left brain loves those kind of outcomes. What is a qualitative outcome, and it is what I call a soft outcome, is not something that's visible or tangible that you can kick. It may be how we feel about ourselves when we're thinner. It may be having the opportunity to have the joy of playing full tilt with our grandkids or our children physically. Those are things that are not as quantitative as they are qualitative. And in one of the master classes, as we were unpacking this, I suddenly had the realization and the awareness that I think to some degree, these hard outcomes and soft outcomes relate very clearly to those left and right brain activities that we stimulate in our minds. With the right brain being the soul, the qualitative, or the things that sing to us, and the quantitative being the very measurable, the very concrete, tangible elements that are very linear in nature. And it's important to have both, and here's why it's really important to stoke both. The quantitative can help give us direction. They give us a destination and a goal in some very easy to celebrate ways. Let's put it that way. The soft or the qualitative things, that's the heart of the goal that drives us. This is where our motivation comes from. And part of the reason people fall off goals is oftentimes they only identify the quantitative outcome they want. They're not in touch with the soul and the qualitative experience that they want to have and that they want to grow into. And when you can name this and you can begin to tap into it and claim it, this is incredibly inspiring. And it's the part when I've talked about SMART goals, this is the relevancy factor. What does it mean for my life? Why does this have meaning? Why does it have importance? Because who cares if we knock out the quantitative if at the end of the day it doesn't matter to us? It's not something that gives us life, and it's not something that breathes, into our soul. So it's really important to be very conscious of both and actively prime our minds with both. And that's what this neuroplasticity is really about. And let me, I'm going to double back and look. Nancy said the why, and I think maybe what you're getting at, Nancy, is, are you saying like the soft is kind of the why behind the what? I think you can almost make that distinction here. And it's how we experience it. The other thing is that when we consciously choose to attend to both of these, we actually engage more of our brain, more fully our brain, and it literally doubles, if not not exponentially increases our chances of succeeding at whatever we're pursuing. So I'm going to pause there and see, Allyson, is that,
yes, that's exactly what I wanted you to cover, John.
Okay.
And we're going to step into some of the science, and then we're going to step back into the why. Nancy, you're exactly right. And we're also going to step into how do you change that? You know, I think that we have a desire, but all of a sudden, physically, how do we begin to change our mindset and make ourselves different tomorrow than we were today? We see a lot of people coming to these classes that are not satisfied with their life. They're not happy with what they're experiencing, and they feel stuck. They feel overwhelmed. And if that's you, I would love for you to go to chat, make sure it goes to everyone. But my guess is that almost all of us experience that point in life where we would rather go with the familiar, even though we need to change. So, John, I want you to encourage people to say, yes, that's how I feel. I definitely want to change, but I'm just not sure how. So I'm going to come back and share 3 slides of the science of change, and then we're going to be talking about how do you actually make that happen in your own life. And I'm going to go into some of the very specific things of what we can do on a daily basis. We don't want these classes just to be a one-way conversation. We want to not just, you know, I go to a lot of these classes and they tell me what I need to do. They say to me that I want to take those quantifiable and enjoy the soft. And what John does so well is that he teaches not just the what purpose is or what those soft skills are. He begins to teach a conversation of how you bring those things to life. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the science of how it happens, how we can reconnect, make our mind things better by doing time management, but also giving ourselves time to reconnect with the soul. That's why people are coming back over and over and over again. So for those of you that are on the class that are science nerds, which I'm one of those, let me share my screen and share 3 things with you. This is some of my favorite things. John, if you want to put amen in there, you will see quickly that I love the science of how all of this works. So we're going to go back here. We're going to play from the current slide. I'm going to come back to this in just a moment. But the brain, you have to understand, we have to step back and look at how the science of the brain works and why we're beginning to understand how the brain can change. In the past, they thought that you could only change your brain for the first 2 years of life. After that, they felt like the brain was hardwired. And we see a lot of people that come to the 7-minute life and they feel like they are hardwired. There's no way to become less disorganized. There's no way to dig out from all the clutter. There's no way, and it's painful when we feel like we can't change. And I mean that at a core level, where we wake up in the morning with this huge, overwhelming cloud of things that the left brain is saying we have to do it. And that left brain speech is, why didn't you do it yesterday? Yes, you have to do it. You're not fast enough. But our brains are not hardwired. This is why it's called neuroplasticity. This is an image of a neuron. This is a single neuron. And what you'll see, these are called dendrites. Dendrites. And the dendrites are the things in neuroplasticity that can grow and change. They grow and change in a lot of ways, but part of it is through sleep. Part of the growth comes from nutrition. Nutrition, I can't spell. Everyone that's on the class knows that I need to have some neuroplasticity about nutrition. It's all of these things that happen in our lives, but the number one thing that changes our brains is repetition. It's when we do things over and over and over again, that's where neural changes take place. Let's look at that and see how it might work in the science world. These are the dendrites. Therefore, the more dendrites that you have, the more connections you can make with other neurons. So what you want to do, and through practice, you begin to create these connections. That's what we have to have. If you're on a freeway and the connections are 4 lanes instead of 1 lane, you're actually going to go down that highway a lot more quickly. When you first learn how to drive, you drive very slowly. The more skill sets that you get, you also drive more quickly. All of these things make common sense. The more pathways you have, the simpler it is to go. The more skill sets that you have, the more confident and the more quickly you'll begin to move through those things and make a difference. This is about a 1-minute visual video. I'm going to play it. It's from Brazil. It is common, so you can use this. This is the human brain. You'll see that it's actually in 2 parts. As you begin to look through the human brain, you will come in and see the neural network that is run by synapses and chemicals. Also electricity. You can see that the human brain is not connected in between the 2. As you go into the brain, you're going to see these neurons. They fire via chemical and electronic ignitions. They fire through that. As you look at this image, you will see that the neural circuits are not quite connected. That's called the synapse. They are firing negative and positive chemicals in and out of those synapses, and because they are not connected, you can rewire those images. As we look at that, it is spectacularly amazing, and it is amazing to me, that our brain can change as we rewire those pieces. I want to show just one more slide. When we are learning something new, you can see that there are very few synaptic connections. When we have very few synaptic connections, it is like going down a 1-lane road with lots of curves, not knowing where you're going, and just going very slowly down. You don't even really know the destination. You're not even sure where you're starting. But these connections are so weak that it's hard to do anything. So when we know we need to start a new behavior, it is just too hard and too painful to start that, because starting something new takes effort. It takes repetition. And because we crave the familiar, we don't really want to change. We say we do, but we choose not to change. If you were to begin to change within a matter of minutes, your neural connections would begin to connect more quickly. They would have more connections. Again, the more connections you have, the more quickly you can learn. But this is just what takes place in a matter of minutes. There's still very weak connections. The more you repeat a behavior, the more repetition you have, the more familiar it becomes. Millions of synaptic connections begin to form. And if these millions, instead of having 4 or 5 lanes to go down, if you have millions of connections, you can see the speed with which things would go through. Let's take this one step further. You've just hired into a new company. You're in a new position. You're trying new things. If everything in your life is new, it's going to take a lot longer. You're not going to know where to find the file folder. You're not going to know which keystroke to put on the computer. If you're there 2 years, you become better at your job because you are more efficient. You know where things are. You can get to them. 10 years into it, you become even more efficient. That's a good and a bad thing. The more efficient you become, the more comfortable you become in what you've done in the past. And here's where it all comes in. What you've done in the past may not make you happy. It may not make you any more productive. It may not build friendships. And all of a sudden, you are living in a rut and your life becomes disorganized, disrespectful even to yourself. And the biggest problem of all is that you lose your soul. The right brain wants to try things. The right brain looks to try things. This is the cow path that we've been talking about. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen at this point, and I'm going to move into much more live illustrations. Well, John, let me stop right there. People understanding the problem with not trying new things, not building things up, and when they don't grow and learn, that hurts their soul. John, let me stop there and see what you're hearing and what questions we can answer for people.
Okay, I'll give them a sec. There'll be a bit of delay as they're responding. I will respond to one thing that Keith brought up as a question, and I think what you were talking about of doing new things is also instrumental to that, and I didn't go there. He said, Nancy, the fire comes, burns up, and then fades away. Jonathan, Allyson, how do you keep the fire to change continuously burning? And my response to him, in case people didn't catch it, because some people may not be in the chat, is that, hang on, let me get this cleared off. We have to constantly engage in a process of re-examination, and that's why the 7-minute planner, that's one reason why the 7-minute planner is on a 90-day cycle, and we encourage people to re-examine your purpose, re-examine your priorities, re-examine your goals every 90 days. And I do a weekly review process as well. We have to go back and we have to look at those things and question them and re-examine them. And it's kind of funny, for growth to happen, we need a combination of routine, but it's got to be a dynamic routine. It has to have the opportunity for change and growth within it. Because what happens is, for example, I teach people Bible reading skills because I'm a pastor, and I work with people trying to establish a daily morning devotional time or an evening devotional time. And what happens is, what's funny is, at first it's new and it's exciting and they're fully engaged in it. And then there comes a point where it gets so familiar that they can even stop learning in it. They're just doing it. And it's really important to constantly re-examine the routines we have and say, what can I do to bring some newness into this so that it still stimulates my life? But it's okay, and this is the thing that I want to emphasize, it's really okay to work at creating a rhythm that goes between newness and routine. One of the things that's happened in our culture is we are so bombarded with instant gratification, and we are so bombarded with everything being available now that we feel like we have to be stimulated with life every single minute. And actually, that's really detrimental to us. We're made to need to live in rhythms of rest and work and rest and work and rest and work. And our minds need that. And that's why it's really important to not be concerned about having that fire burn brightly all the time, but it's okay to have periods where we're just in a routine and we're maintaining for a while, and we're at just a very stable place. Because during that time of stability is oftentimes where things get healed, fixed. That's a really good time. And I think, though, we're newness junkies in our culture. So it's important to keep a balance between the two. I hope that's helpful. And I need to look and see what other messages have come in.
It's definitely helpful, John. I think it's kind of a push kind of thing. And so I'm going to move on into the next segment, and then we're going to go into some very practical things. And for those of you that have attended, a lot of the learning takes place in the question and answer. These classes are from 11 to 12, and then we stay and answer questions from 12 to 12:30 Central Standard Time. As I go into this last piece and then talk about some solutions, we just looked at the cow path. As we looked at the cow path, the cows have, in Arkansas, let's say 400, 500 acres, and they do during the day. They go through all these places. But when the dinner bell rings, they come back through the same path day after day after day. That's how cows are made, that they want to go the same route, the same way. And in life, I guess cows don't really care, but in life, that creates ruts for us. And how many of us drive the same way to work? We go the same place. We have the same positive and negative things. We think the only way we can go is here. And what happens when we do that, our brains become stuck. And we don't realize that we can make a point to change, that we have to do that specifically. As I look at this, we are left or right. This is a fork in the road. We get to a point in life, let's say that it's today, and we're on this call because a lot of things. We like where we are. We want to continue to grow. Continual learning is amazing. I love learning new things, but here's where we are today. And today we get to a point where either we can go this way or we can go that way. We can choose to sit on these calls and say, wow, I learned a lot. I loved it today, but I didn't take action. I didn't make enough of these pieces that my brain could change. Remember the left brain, actually the whole brain. The entire brain says that life is either plus or minus. We label things as good or bad. We say we are smart or literally not smart. Not smart. There is no in between. Just like a computer, plus, minus, yes, no. As the brain functions and we're tying together these dendrites, literally the brain takes over. Let's say that you've been doing this all of your life. I've chosen to be disorganized. It's just grown into part of who I am. I've done the same job the same way. I have the same thoughts. And so what happens is every day that passes that we do these things, we strengthen the neural pathways until it becomes familiar. Whether we like it or not, we kind of like it. What happens if you stop doing this and you say today I'm going to begin to grow. And starting today, I'm going to choose to have conscious thoughts that are going to lead me down this way. I'll get one that writes. I'm going to take consciousness and I'm going to move down this way. If you're feeding these thoughts, literally giving them time, effort, and energy, if you are feeding these things, if you're strengthening these, this will die. If these things are not giving your time and attention, if the fact that good or bad does not have to exist, there's actually a continuum. If we don't continue to feed these things, they become less and less a part of your life. These things that we feed gain more strength. Now, in almost every class that I teach, I share the fact that I struggle even today with anxiety, worry, and depression. It's something that this class and the 7-Minute Life is very aware of. 1 in 4 of us on this class together still struggle with that anxiety and that depression because this is just kind of how our brain is made. I have to begin, and I hope I encourage you, to begin to do things that are fun, to reconnect with the soul. A lot of this is left brain, but I've gone through hard things that affect my soul. So how do we deal with that? Neuroplastically, how do we deal with that? And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up some of this, and then John, I'm going to open it up to questions and let you take those because his brain functions completely different than anyone else's. He is very intuitive, very thoughtful, very connected with what he believes. So I'm just going to take a sip of water. For those of you that are new to the 7-Minute Life, We believe you have to connect these pathways, even in life. That if we've been disorganized, we've not been able to follow through with the things, then we need concrete tools to go that way. We've been going this way with our life. We're familiar with it. It works okay. But it's not taking us where we want to go. We have to make a conscious choice to make different choices in our lives and to go that way. That's why I created this 7-Minute Life Daily Planner. And I am not going to be selling these things, although we think they're great. Almost every tool that is in here is free. John, can you type in the chat, the 7minutelife.com/tools? But I do think we have to make choices. So let me just quickly walk you through this. I think we've got 7 minutes left. That's kind of interesting before it's noon. One of the things that we want you to understand is that in order to be different, we have to choose to take what is most important to ourselves, to take the things we value. Is it adventure, faith, love, all of those things? And we have to step out of the noise, the chaos, and we have to begin to look for those, consciously look at them. Am I continue to go this way so fast, so busy that I'm not able to take care of it? And then we want to help you organize that. We want to give you the tools, the ways that you can actually take this chaos and organize it. And the bottom line is we want to help people simplify how they do that. These are 90-day books. People say, why, John, you said it a minute ago. Life is seasonal. We go through periods of winter, and then we go through periods of regrowth in spring, and then where it's hot and it's exciting of the summer, and then it comes back to the fall where things, and that just happens in life. So why not have all these things? Why not have a system where every 90 days you can relook at your priorities? Why do you need to do that? Because going down the highway of life, we have to begin to build these connections, to be aware of them, to look at them. Last week, John talked about purpose. How do you create it? Not just what it is, but how do you look at the recipients, the who of who you're going to serve? How do you look at the how, the way that you're going to use your gifts and talents, and how do you understand the results of what just connecting with these things can make a difference? When was the last time you stepped out of the noise of busyness, of going down the same path, and you said, I'm going to do more than just watch these. I'm going to sit down and actually go that way. I'm going to live with priorities and with values. These are very much connected to your soul. We haven't talked about this one yet, but when was the last time you looked at your highest and best? What do you love about life? What is your soul? John, this is something we're going to be teaching in the next thing. I'm just going to show this last one. I think we have to become very aware of the mental clutter in our lives. We've become so familiar with going this way that we have so much clutter in our lives that we don't even know where to start. And that's very real. But let's go back to time management. We have a lot of things that go into this planner, but neuroplastically, if you want to just go beyond the soul and start looking at ways that you can change your life at work, if we can move into that left brain and make a choice, and John, I'm going to get you to follow up on this. When you come to the 7-minute life and you choose to make some differences, and you start with that to-do list that you have, and you say, okay, I've got to do all these things today. I've got to get it done. All of a sudden, this can become overwhelming because my guess is you didn't get done yesterday what you need to do today. So all the things that were on this list have now moved over to this list, except this list is now longer and longer and longer and longer. And as this grows, all of a sudden you don't just have 2 or 3 or 5 or 6. And John, I'd love to have people tell me if this is reality, that now they're just swimming or sinking into total chaos to a point they don't even know where to start. So if you go in and you start listening to the 7-minute life, to the left brain things that we teach, how do you dig out from under all The way that you begin to dig out is through repetition. In order to make things better, you have to begin to repeat good or positive behaviors. Good or positive behaviors. If you remember what happens when we go into positive behaviors, we have to repeat them day after day after day. And for those of you that come to the 7-minute life and think this is going to be a solution that's going to happen overnight, of course that's not true. If you picked up a golf club and attended a class online that said, here's how you play golf, this is how it's going to connect to your soul, this is how you hold the club, all you would know is that you enjoyed watching a webinar. The only way to play golf is to go day after day after day to play with other people that love golf. That's why these classes are becoming such a community. So how do you, in the last 3 minutes of what we've got going on today, how do you find those neuroplastic ways to create repetition that is good and positive, that still is left brain, but by using the left brain, it allows you to reconnect with your soul. So look at the priorities and purpose. How do you create these behaviors using tools that are repeatable? And here's where I'm going to close out, John. I'm going to give you just a few minutes to go back. Is I think we have to take all of these things that we need to do, and we have to realize that we flat out can't do them all. So we have to prioritize our tasks and become aware of what amount of time it takes, which is another one that we're going to do. And out of all this, we have to choose which things we're going to do today. And with all of my heart and all of my soul, I want to say, we will be lucky if we can do 5 things during that day. As we go through these things, these cannot be big things. These have to be micro actions, things that you can do in less than 20 minutes. Again, very small tasks, because where we begin to regenerate our soul is not when we come in with a to-do list, but we come in with priorities that are important, that move us forward along the line, and we say, here are the 5. We call this our 5 before 11. Here are the 5 things I'm going to commit to, and as I accomplish the number 1 thing on my list, I mark it off. 2nd one, 3rd one, 4th one, 5th one. If you were just to do 5 small things before 11 o'clock, what would that mean to you? And then, John, I'm turning this back over to you. This is the power of the 7-minute life. This is the power of using the tool that day after day after day has 5 before 11. Very simple. If you were to accomplish 5 things before 11 o'clock for a week, you would go on a new path that would accomplish 35 things in the next 7 days. If you would make a commitment to do this for 90 days, neuroplastically repeating it over and over again, you would accomplish 450 tasks by repeating them over and over again. And the accomplishment of that, marking things off your list, doing what you said you would do, is amazing. John, it's 12 o'clock. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Gosh, we've had a lot of people commenting, and Susan asked, can you take just a moment, and a couple people had a question around this, say a word about mental clutter and maybe distinguish it a little bit from unfinished tasks?
Yes, I would love to. Great question. John, if you'll put that down, I think that's something that we need to have an entire conversation on. Remember that the human brain is not hardwired. People think that once we go into this, we will never be able to change what we do. And it's the never, it's the always things in our lives. I will always be unhappy. I will always have mental clutter. So what is mental clutter? And why is it important for us to understand it? Mental clutter are those things in our lives that weigh us down. Take an analogy of physical clutter. When you walk into your house or your office and you have things that are piled up in your life and you don't know where to start, my guess is it never is tended to. When things are so overwhelming, we're frozen. We're unable to take action. In our brains, we begin to fill this up, either consciously or unconsciously, with so much clutter that we don't have a way to create new connections. We literally become trapped, and it is very difficult to take even 5 minutes a day because we become frozen. So what is the mental clutter in our lives, and why is this helpful? I think the mental clutter in my life, so I'm going to just bare my soul here, John. The mental clutter that I have in my life is realizing that I'm disorganized. Now that may surprise you, but the reason is because I haven't prioritized the things that I want to do. The other mental clutter is we may get a lot done. John talks about this all the time. We may be super organized and get a lot done, but it is completely meaningless to us. So what kind of things are mental clutter? I think anxiety. I'm just going to go without spelling. I think hard conversations that need to happen that weigh on us day after day after day, where we just choose to accept things, even though we know if we'd have that conversation. Another thing that I think we do is here's where we are. We know we need to take action. We've not taken the action, and what we do is we assume what the outcome is going to be. And so we assume that something's bad going to happen. And this gap in here, because we know we need to do something, we're stuck here, whether it's a negative conversation that we have to have, or a financial decision to sell a house, or something that we need to have. Instead of taking the action, all we do is look at an outcome that is faulty. So I think the mental clutter in my life have to do with relationships that need to be repaired, all of those things that weigh over us, the cleaning that we need to do, the financial decisions we need to make. These are big things. But let me tell you where the beauty of this comes. The beauty of writing down the things that are there is not to weigh you down. When we acknowledge the mental clutter, when we simply acknowledge it, in those quiet points in our lives where we are in the shower, where we're walking down the street, we don't have to learn how to fix these things. We just have to be aware of them. And when I'm aware of them, specifically things start working themselves out. It may take a year. But I think what we do in life is we feel overwhelmed by the clutter, and it makes us feel bad. And when we feel bad and trapped and stuck by the clutter, we can't move forward. And so part of what I'm looking at this year for me are 3 words. I want to begin to give myself grace and realize I can't fix everything, and I certainly can't fix everything today. I also want to begin, and these are my words for 2017, is I want to have mercy. Mercy on myself and also mercy on other people. A lot of times I blame other people about the mental clutter in my life. And the final one is freedom. Now, obviously, all of these for me are related to faith. So that's an underscoring. But if I can have grace in my life where I don't have to fix things right now, and I can have mercy even on myself of letting the fact go that I can't solve everything, it's then that I'll find freedom from knowing I don't have to fix it, but by understanding it, I can let my heart and soul, I can let my right brain and my left brain work towards untying some of these things. This is a big deal. That's why it's in the book. We need to acknowledge it, but we need to give ourselves grace and mercy so that instead of having clutter, we can have freedom, even without fixing them. I don't believe that all of this is ever going to go away.
Okay, super. I think that pretty well hit it. If somebody needs a clarifying question, let us know. Did that answer the question? And I'm going to jump in and mention a couple things. Allyson was raising the question, so what do we do practically speaking to prompt this neuroplasticity to build these new pathways? So Allyson had a moment ago an illustration up there where we're on one path, we want to shift and we want to go down another path, and we need repetition. But let's talk about that really practically for a moment. Repetition of what? Repetition of you know, well, let's just what? What can we do to create repetition around the idea of a new change? Because first, that new change starts as an idea, right? So we have to get clarity on the idea. The more clear we can be around the idea, the more we can picture it, taste it, touch it, smell it in our minds, the easier it will be to act on it. And one of the big problems when people set goals or a goal for a new behavior is many people start out with far too little clarity around it. So you want to get clarity. You want to make it as crystal clear as you can and engage as much of your mind in the mental image of what that looks like for you. One of the things that I use in my daily life that helps with neuroplasticity, I journal, and when I journal, I have affirmations I write out on my whatever my goal is. So, for example, around my health goal last year that I was working on, I frequently wrote in my journal in a present tense sense, and from a first-person perspective, I would say, I feel great, my body is strong and lean, my heart rate is low and steady, and because of that, I enjoy getting to do activities that I like going on a bike ride with my wife or taking my dog for a long walk outside. And I would write these things in my journal. And one of the things I was doing was I was brain patterning. I was laying down a footprint in my mind to be able to follow. I was carving out that trail to be able to follow it. So we can do that through mental work of rehearsing what we want to see in reality. And some people do that through affirmations, which can be verbal or they can be written, or ideally, I think both. And I do both. Repetition of action around what the new changes that you want in your life. If you can create ideally a habit or a routine, that's really, really helpful. If you can work out at the same time, it sort of tethers it in place with something that's pre-existent about your day. For example, one way of kind of tethering a new activity to an existing activity, which is a great way to prompt consistency, and that's what this neuroplasticity is all about, is linking it to something you commonly do. For example, waking up in the morning, getting ready for the day, having breakfast, or your getting dressed routine, things that are already routines for you. If you can tether on to existing routines, it makes it much easier to brain pattern around it and make it a change that is going to stick. So, and I had an example in mind there. I'll come back to it when it comes back to me, but it kind of went, I had it there and it just flipped out somewhere, so I'll come back to it in a moment. But affirmations, habits, and I had, using triggers to remind us. Using triggers to remind us. What do I mean by triggers? For example, with a workout habit, I think it was Michael Hyatt was talking about when he started working out, he was hit and miss on it until he set out his workout clothes the night before. He prepped his gym bag the night before, and he set it out someplace visual so that it would be a reminder, it would be a trigger to get him going down that path. It's like we almost need someone when we're standing, every day when we wake up, we're standing here. We almost need someone to give us a push for those first couple steps. And once we get on the path, it tends to go easier, once we can get on that path. Particularly the more we go up and down, up and down, and up and down. So affirmations, that's a mental way to rehearse those brain patterns, to strengthen them, to build those neurons. Through activity, through doing, that solidifies those neurons, those mental pathways. And then triggers help, they're an external force to help push us toward that consistent brain pattern. So those are really concrete, tangible ways you can take advantage of neuroplasticity. Triggers can take on all kinds of forms. They can be putting something out. They can be visual. They can be putting a Post-it note on your dash of your car, or on your computer screen, or on your bathroom mirror. Triggers can be external in terms of having other people. Accountability is a trigger. And when we have people who know what we're doing and they ask us about it, or we do it together, that becomes a trigger. Like you all being in this webinar, the folks who have consistently been in these webinars for several weeks now, or even several months, they're beginning to see some results, and they're beginning to experience a shift, not just experience doing something new, but a shift in how they do things. There was one thing I wanted to add to this, and it's gonna kind of shift here in a moment. Allyson was talking about prioritizing, and I want to talk about this in terms of clarity. I hope you catch a distinction. In traditional time management, very often they don't take any time to figure out priorities or purpose first. And as a result, what happens is, think of this cup, I often use it as an example of having 24 hours in your day, and each one of these items in the cup is a task. And there's a limit to what you can put in there. Allyson was talking about that limited capacity. There's only so many pencils or items. There's a set volume for that. And we have to be careful about what we choose to put in there. I think traditional time management too often starts with prioritizing tasks by assuming what needs to be in the cup, and prioritization becomes moving those things around in terms of what gets done first. And yes, we want to take the most important things and put them at the top, but I want to be really clear that when we talk about prioritization, it's really two levels of prioritization. The first order of prioritization is to decide, and this is where we use 7 minutes in the morning and 7 minutes in the evening, what's even going to go in the cup. Let's not assume anything in there yet. For example, these are all possibilities of what could be there. I have in my possibilities right now, this is a pencil with a dried out eraser and a broken lead. I don't want that in my cup, okay? That doesn't do me any good. But if we assume it and we leave it there, it's taking up space for other things. Prioritization starts before you even put anything in the cup. Prioritization starts with saying, what's most important? My family? Is it my health? Is it my devotional life? Is it my work? And, you know, all of those things are going to have some level of importance, but we prioritize that importance first. And then we say, okay, well, if my family is most important to me, then let's put that in first. I want to make sure that I have time for my daughter after school today because she has a big project. So I'm going to set aside from 4 to 5. I'm going to be spending that with my daughter, taking her to the store to get what she needs for her project. And then we keep working our way through the list, and we get the things that are most important in there first, and then all of that other stuff, which may have limited value, we can allow that into the cup. But, you know, we really want to look first and go, I really love blue. I want a dark blue. I want a light blue. I want a blue-green. I want as many blues in my cup as I can get. Not just assume what's in there. And that's what happens with most of us. We're just living reactively. We're assuming responsibility for whatever life has pushed at us through other people's expectation or circumstance. And it's time to take power and control of that and choose actively first what you want in there. And I hope that makes sense. And then the things that are most important to reinforce this. One other thing that I'll add is a reinforcement that we teach in a master class, which people are finding is really powerful, and that is tracking. And that's where a daily planner is really important. You want to track how you're doing on things to see if you're actually doing what you said you would do. And if you look at the 7-Minute Life Daily Planner, there's things for tracking money, physical health, relationships, all kinds of different aspects of life. But just the raw activity of tracking makes a huge difference. And some of you have been on prior webinars where I talk about tracking wins. Did I live in my values today? How did I do that? And I had someone say yesterday in a roundtable discussion from a master class, they said, you know, what I found is just by tracking it, I start thinking about the next day and what I want in there. And I'm like, that's ideal. That's that neuroplasticity at work. So I've thrown a lot at you. I'm going to pause there because it's 12:19, and that gives us 11 minutes to ask some other questions. Now I got to look at these. And I'll let you, Allyson, you can chime in, or I can look at these and see.
John, I'd like to chime in for just a minute, and this is kind of left brain stuff. You know, I don't want to leave people thinking that we have to live just a left brain life. I love it's the right brain life. I love being left brain. I like writing the books. I like seeing things start and finish. You know, I came up to Texarkana this last weekend and taught a class at your church about priorities and purpose, but then also about goal setting. So I think all of that has to happen. But John, as we close out, I want people to understand that the 7-minute life is not just what the problems are. Today we've talked about neuroplasticity. That's not a problem. That's a call to action.
Yeah.
It's a call to action. And so how do you do that with the 7-minute life? Where does the 7-minute life fall into this? Back to what we were talking about, I think we have to understand that there are 24 hours in the day. This is all left brain. That means there are 1,440 minutes. This is all we have. You know, if we want to put something else into this 1,440 minutes, if we want to exercise, if we want to spend time with our family, instantly, because this is a limited framework, when we add something in, something else is automatically knocked out, like John was saying. So if I want to get another project done, it may mean I can't exercise. Okay, so there are 1,440 minutes. Our entire theory is that we want everyone on this call to take 1% of their time, 1% of their day. That's 14 minutes. And we want to call you to have a neuroplastic reaction to this, where you are choosing to take a specific action every day. That's where it gets hard, is the day after day, to have accountability. That's why we're coming into these classes. So what do you do during those 14 minutes? You take 7 minutes in the evening, and you think about what you want to do. And then you take 7 minutes in the morning. So this is where you create your to-do list. You begin to prioritize the things that you want to do. These are physical left brain things. In the morning, in that 7 minutes, guess what we have to do? A lot of times we have to recalibrate. The moment we walk in the office, things change. We have to recalibrate. But where does the neuroplasticity come in? Making a conscious decision to take 1% of our time, to not think and go that way, but to choose to think. And the more often you think, day after day after day after day, how do you think? How do you build these connections? You literally change your brain by what you think about. Television or reading. Thinking about this, coming to these classes. You start those changes via thinking. You strengthen those actions via writing. Taking notes, writing things down. Back to John's point, writing down who you want to be. The neuroplastic change, though, happens when we do it. When we take this 1%, when we take the planner or whatever it is, and we begin to think, write, and do. But let me share this with you. I believe the biggest change of all happens when you teach it. When you absorb it into your heart and soul and you take it out and you encourage other people. Let's think about it. As a business, let's write about it. As a team, let's do it. And as you, let's teach it to other people. I think that's really key. John, there are 5 minutes left. I'd love to have people talk about why this repetition of 7 minutes over and over and over. I've been doing this for 10 years. 10 years of learning how to not be as disorganized. I have attention deficit disorder. I am diagnosed with it. I take medicine for it. And let me tell you, sometimes when you're like me, you can be incredibly creative. And you can bring good things out of that. And you can celebrate. When was the last time you had a win in the day and you celebrated it? I mean, left brain, right brain, it doesn't matter. Laughed out loud, felt like an adventure. As John says, created an epic goal and accomplished it. You know, are you thinking about those goals? Are you writing them down? Are you taking that step by step? Are you bringing other people in as accountability? And are you teaching it to the people around you? So, John, my excitement has taken over. I'm going to let you close this up with any final question. Do y'all feel this? Don't you want that celebration, the adventure, even if it's mundane mental clutter? Saying, yep, I've taken that one mental clutter, I've chosen to think about it, I've had the hard conversation, and I'm freed from that. This is important stuff. Come back week after week. Tell your friends about this, but teach it to your family, teach it to your coworkers. John, this is really important. Neuroplasticity happens from repetition and action over and over again. It doesn't change overnight. It changes over weeks and months and years. So, John, we've got, 4 minutes left. I'm going to sit down and let you wrap us up.
Well, I've got one question, and you can give it all about 2 minutes, maybe. That was, Susan asked, could you give a little bit of distinction between the 7 minutes in the morning and the 7 in the evening? Because she's wondering, are they the same thing or how are they different?
Yeah, I can. And, you know, that's the biggest question we're getting. Is that Susan that I know well, or is it a different
Yeah,
Susan?
that's Susan you know well.
Hi, Susan.
That's Susan, our webinar winner of a master class. So
Susan is very insightful too. We're beginning to get to know these people. Susan, I think what you're talking about is this 1% is actually 14 minutes. It's the most important 14 minutes of our life. And again, we're just teaching you what it is. I think your point is well taken. We've said what it is. I think your question is how. How do you execute this? What do you physically do during that period of time? So for me, in the evening, of course, I take out my planner. Now, I've created, you know, when you own the company, John, you get to change it however you want. So just so you know, we've got some cool things coming. I have taken my planner, and instead of just having the ability to take things out, how cool is that I can, John, I'm sorry, I'm a nerd, that we're creating new things. But instead of having just a coil binder, you can open it up and put things in it. So if you want to find out more about that, let me know. It is really cool. Anyway, in the evening, I literally pull out my planner because I want everything in one place. In the evening, I try to step out of the noise. I set my timer, and in the evening, I literally brainstorm. I think about everything that has to happen. I don't try to plan it. I just create a to-do list. I think about things that I want to do in the future. I don't have boundaries on this. I just write things down. So in the evening, it's an opportunity to dream, to imagine, to also think about what I have to get done. Like last night, I was thinking, I've got to get ready for this webinar. So the things that you have to do, especially the things that you have to do. So if you had projects today, you might write down these projects that you have, and then you may rank them during that 7 minutes. Also, if you have projects, one of the things that we teach is that you can't do a project. You can't do that, so you have to break down your project. So I think about all that the night before. And by having that and holding it in my hand, of course, you can download all these things, but to hold that in my hand gives me more assurance for me, because when I write it down, I've made a commitment. So I want to just close out. What do I do in the evening? I brainstorm, I create a to-do list, I think about the future, I write down what I am going to prioritize. If it's a project, I break it down. What do I do in the morning? Everything changes. The world is a changing place. In the morning, I take that 7 minutes to review, to then say yes or no, am I going to do that? Is it the most important? I also think about what I need. I gather the files, I write down the people I need to talk to, I break things down even farther, and then I have to recalibrate. I have to choose, as people walk in my office, typically in the morning, if I had these things to do, can I really do this one if this now has become urgent? So I recalibrate in the morning. I still have a written plan of action. I still want that end result of being able to mark these things off my list. And as John says, I want the wins, I want to celebrate it, and at the end of the day, I want to get to a place where I can say enough, I've done what I said I want to do. Great questions.
All righty. We got 1 minute, so I better wrap it up. First off, thank you everyone for commenting and jumping in. There's been some fantastic teaching and learning going on in the chat, as there always is. So I want to thank everybody who participated in the chat. And let's give Allyson a big woo-hoo and thank you for laying out neuroplasticity for us. I just love the way she covers this. I always default to her covering it because she really gets that brain science side of it. Next week, let me say a word about what's coming up, and we'll close with that. Next week, I'm going to be sharing with you weekly review process. Now it doesn't sound like a very glorious topic. It doesn't sizzle. It's not like we go, woohoo, reviewing weekly. Oh, I want to learn about that. You know, it's not as exciting as rediscovering your life purpose or crafting your priorities. But you really want to sit in on this one. And here's why. For my annual goals, I've always been great at setting annual goals. And a couple of years ago, I recognized that my annual goals and other goals, I was feast or famine on them. And what I mean by that is I would set, a dozen goals, and I would find like 4 or 5 of them I would knock out of the park. And then the rest of them, I may not even touch, or vice versa. I might do 6 or 8, and then 4 or 5, I never even touch. And it seemed like there was no in between, or very little in between. Well, this past year, every single one of my goals, I invested a significant amount of time in, every single goal. I would say 3/4 of them, I achieved or exceeded what I hoped to do with them. And there were about 1/4 that I didn't wind up with them where I wanted to be. But honestly, the vast majority of that 1/4, somewhere at some point during the year, I realized that it was a goal that needed to be adjusted or needed to be dropped. Some of them I flat out dropped because there were things that shifted as the year moved on, and I realized that it was a goal that didn't have the same relevancy for me or wasn't as realistic as I thought it should be. And the magic difference between those years of feast and famine versus consistent and substantial progress on all my goals, no doubt about it, the tool that helped me the most with that was doing a weekly review. Now, that said, even if you don't have annual goals, don't think that you'd have to have those for this to be valuable. A weekly review that you consistently do at a given time and place is invaluable for your time management. It is going to increase your consistency, it's going to increase your results, and it's going to reduce your stress. So I hope you can be here for that webinar. And just in a word, a few other little things that are coming up. Allyson, the next week we'll be looking at tracking things at more a daily level. There are some elements of the daily progress report pages for tracking that are really wonderful little tools. And again, this is a topic I default to her on because she has just some masterful experience at using those, having both created the planner and used it for 10 plus years. And we'll be looking at some priorities the week after that. And then last but not least, we actually have planned out through February, but I'll end with this last one. One of our Tuesday webinars is going to fall on Valentine's Day. So we're going to take some time and share with you how to invest time in relationships and some really practical things you can do to deepen and strengthen relationships. Because let's face it, folks, that's where a lot of the joy and the meaning and the fiber of life is. It's in the connections we have with other people and relationships. And that's one we haven't really taught a whole lot about. So pretty excited about things coming up. Next week, please join me for weekly review. And I will have this out just as soon as we can edit the replay. We'll have it out and we'll send you a link in email. And that's it. See you all next week, hopefully. Bye now.